Hello and good afternoon, good morning, and even good evening to some of you. Attendees, welcome to our webinar. I'm happy to inform you that in today's webinar, we have more than 100 participants attending with us from different countries. Together, we have attendees from Vietnam, from the Philippines, from Malaysia, from Thailand. We even have attendees from India, attendees from the USA, you're welcome here, and from different parts of Europe and as well as Africa. And there's still many more locations joining with us today to learn about this exciting topic. And again, we'd like to thank you and we welcome you all to this webinar. We will begin in a very short while. We're just waiting for some attendees to settle down and come in and join us today. Maybe in a minute or so, we'll be starting this exciting webinar and learn about this topic from our expert today. Once again, welcome everyone and thank you for joining in another eFeedLink webinar. My name is Alvin and I'll be your host for today. Before we get started, please allow me to talk a little bit about eFeedLink and our services. eFeedLink.com is one of the most visited feed and livestock industry websites. Our species-focused website has dedicated channels covering the latest market news, hot topics, technical information, industry interviews, event highlights, and company updates in the feed and livestock industry. Livestock and Feed Business is the preferred magazine for key decision makers from the feed and livestock industry to stay abreast of emerging market developments, industry happenings, and technologies. Please do subscribe to Livestock and Feed Business at efeedlink.com. And in case you cannot receive a print copy, the e-magazine or the digital copy of the version will be emailed to you on a monthly basis. And finally, you can organize webinars in our eFeedLink Agri Digital Hub, targeted specifically to the livestock and feed industry. Please do visit agrihub.efeedlink.com to view and sign up for all our future webinars. Before we start the topic, if you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your Zoom control panel, and we will bring them up during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Today, we are exploring the role of fatty acids in animal development and health. Fatty acids are vital for livestock development and health. Essential fatty acids like omega-3 and omega-6 are crucial for growth, reproductive health, and immune function. They support healthy cell membranes, enhance feed efficiency, and improve muscle and brain development in young animals. For breeding livestock, balanced fatty acid intake boosts fertility and pregnancy outcomes. Additionally, these nutrients maintain healthy skin and coat, reducing disease risk. Proper dietary management of fatty acids is essential for maximizing livestock productivity and ensuring long-term health. And to share his knowledge and expertise in the benefits of species-specific fatty acid nutrition, eFeedLink has invited Dr. Sandor, Global Monogastrics Species Manager at Berg+Schmidt Animal Nutrition. Dr. Sandor leads phospholipid and fatty acid research initiatives to improve poultry health and efficiency. With nearly a decade at the company, his work in technical support and management and product line positioning has significantly contributed to animal and human nutrition. Without further ado, please help me welcome our speaker for today, Dr. Sandor.
Thank you, Alvin, for the nice introduction, and I do welcome all the participants for today's session. Please allow me to share my computer screen so that we can start our discussion today. I hope everything is in order. And
Yeah, we're able to see it.
yes, thank you very much. You see the pointer in the red laser, right?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Again, sorry for this short technical aspects of my speech today, but I do welcome you, and I'm honored to present my thoughts about fatty acids and their particular application as dietary solutions to certain problems and opportunities at the same time. I kind of deviate a little bit from the original title. I exchanged the animal word to poultry. So today's session is about having a poultry focus, where I would like to share our own experiences as a company in this field. Plus, we would like to cite open-ended or open source material that are readily available for all of you. Of course, in the end, I would be very happy to answer to your questions, and if not possible to answer at the moment, we would be honored to have a follow-up session. So today's agenda is to briefly revisit the meaning of fatty acids and their role in animal nutrition. And then I would like to explore the interrelationships in practice and also potential applications when we are doing feed formulation for poultry. And of course, I would be very happy to share our experiences from the field. And then I would like to conclude and field your questions. So what are the fatty acids? Let's start to the general terms. In chemistry, and particularly in biochemistry, these are carboxylic acids that can be either saturated or unsaturated. Of course, the most naturally occurring fatty acids are unbranched, and we are interested in particular from the chain length of 4 to 28 carbon atoms. The fatty acids, of course, are important components of lipids and mostly exist in three main classes of esters, let it be triglycerides, phospholipids, or very complex lipids as cholesterol esters. In any other form, it doesn't matter in terms of the fatty acids are both important for creating signalization molecules in physiology, and also they are important components as dietary sources and structural components for cells in the diet. So we have to take a particular attention to their volumes and also their relationship to each other. Now, our company has been on this field for a long time. In fact, this is one of our expertise in the last 60 plus years. And you can see on the top of this table, the particular 10 to 12 important fatty acids that we are interested in when we are mapping out the particular material on the left-hand side, in fact, as energy source. So we like to count the different fatty acid components, and then we like to summarize them as either total saturated or total unsaturated fatty acids on the right-hand side. And in between, it is a very interesting exercise for all nutritionists, in my opinion, including myself, that what is the deviation and the content of these different fatty acids regarding the different oil or fat source that we are obliged or can use. Of course, combinations in feed formulation programs are readily possible. The most important thing is when we do analyze and we're absolutely sure what is in the fatty acid composition of a particular energy source, like coconut oil or corn oil, or let it be soybean oil. I think it is important to understand the interrelationship of fatty acids, and especially when we are using blended energy sources, or we plan to alter the dietary fatty acid profile. And for this purpose, it's important to know the exact composition of these fatty acids. Being one of my passion is poultry nutrition, so I would like to show you the composition of either poultry recycled oil or yellow grease and beef tallow. What are the differences? The differences are well noted, especially on the total saturated and total unsaturated fatty acid content. And we know from literature that broilers and poultry in general deposit fat into their body parts in a different proportional manner. And I just summarize it a little bit below. White meat is having a very little deposition possibility. However, we can alter as well that one if we are choosing the right fatty acid profile in the diet. Of course, red meats and under the skin especially, we can influence greatest the fatty acid composition, and that can be affecting the culinary and cooking characteristics of the chicken, what we are growing. Of course, the live weight of the chicken differs from market to market, but the deposition, especially under the skin, is important. And ultimately, we like to avoid excessive deposition in the abdominal cavity because this is a condemnation factor. So a significant part of the body composition of the chicken can be influenced by dietary fatty acids, and that is the reason we are talking today. Of course, when we have the understanding of the poultry fat, technically around 30% total saturated fatty acid composition, and the remainder part is total unsaturated fatty acid. And this seems to be the governing principle when we are analyzing the total fatty acid composition of slaughter-aged birds. I'm talking about broilers here. We also do know from the literature that broilers respond really well to this kind of particular ratio of total saturated fatty acids and total unsaturated fatty acids being 30 to 70% respectively. Why is this important? Because we understand from many, many trials from the field and also from cited literature that this particular ratio or around it, plus minus 10%, can favorably influence the average daily feed intake and also the average daily weight gain, which is an important technical parameter. Not to mention feed efficiency. Feed efficiency is important these days. In fact, modern broiler breeds we know can be further improved, especially on the efficiency of feed appreciation. So when we do this, we can also affect potentially favorably the mortality, causing less oxidative stress on the birds. And what is not that well known, but is, I think, experts around the world are very much interested in this, how we can influence after the slaughter drip loss and also culinary effects of the different chicken parts. I'd like to show you examples on this because we have carried out our own particular trials on this one. What are the benefits? I think this is important that we show some important literature citations and also our own trials. First and foremost, this particular slide is trying to make you understand the implication of source. When we are using different fatty acid or fat sources, we have to understand their relative composition to each other, either when you have a single use or when you have the blended use of these. Particularly, I'm talking about the beef tallow. It used to be very popular in Southeast Asia and depends on the availability. Soy oil is the most ubiquitous energy source. Coconut oil in particular aspects and particular markets in the world are very important, especially in Southeast Asia. Palm oil, of course, is also readily available around the world, and palm kernel oil is one of our expertise. And of course, if you have the chance and authorities allow, the recycled poultry oil is one of the best sources for this total saturated fatty acid and total unsaturated fatty acid ratios. So favorably, it would be excellent to just to feed poultry recycled oil, but it's not always possible. In fact, this is not that available around the world in my experience. However, we can do a good thing when we do feed these different types of vegetable fats to alter, and this is the important part, the last section, to alter the body composition in terms of total saturated fatty acids and total unsaturated fatty acid ratios. So let's walk through a little bit. On the top section, you see the composition of these different vegetable fatty acid sources. However, when you feed them only, let's start with beef tallow, you can achieve the body composition and total saturated fatty acid and total unsaturated fatty acid ratio almost ideal, I would say. On the other hand, next to it, soy oil, which is the cheapest and most ubiquitously available vegetable fat source, this ratio is a little bit tilted. Not best, but this is the compromise that we have to make. In those markets where coconut oil is available, it's a very special situation because the total saturated fatty acid content of coconut oil in comparison to its total unsaturated fatty acid part is significant. But coconut oil is a wonderful product because we know that medium chain triglycerides do not require any particular and dedicated transportation mechanisms when they are absorbed. And they are also providing relatively fast and instant energy due to the nature of their fatty acid profile. So is palm oil, but palm oil has a bit of a problem. Anything below 25 degrees or at 25.4 degrees Celsius, palm oil becomes a bit of greasy or hardens up. So difficult to handle. However, in Southeast Asia and in tropical countries, palm oil is a lot of viability, in fact, and also when it's available, it's a wonderful source for energy for poultry. A little bit of alteration of the fatty acid ratio is possible together using with in composition, in combination with other vegetable fat sources. Palm kernel is also very special, a little bit similar in behavior like coconut oil, but in particular, we are altering and managing. I'm talking about really management of specific fatty acid, medium chain fatty acid profiles. And of course, when we have the recycled yellow grease, these are the two best sources next to beef tallow to alter the total body composition as designated from open source literature. Now, of course, this is very interesting and very important. How to do this? This is a question. And I think how to achieve this ideal total saturated fatty acid and total unsaturated fatty acid ratio. This is a species-specific ratio, actually. I forgot to mention that in other monogastric species, we have to consider their age, growing stage, and also the total body composition, let it be pigs and other monogastric farmed species. So today, poultry is the most ideal is around 25 to 30% or 30 total saturated fatty acid versus the remainder part as total unsaturated fatty acid profile. First step is, of course, we have to set out this as a goal in our feed formulation system. We have a bit of a problem if we can only have one type of fatty acid source or fat source. On the other hand, I do encourage you to search for potentially making a combination product. So when you have access to other, let it be high saturated fat as source vegetable fat, you can achieve this ideal ratio. The second step is, of course, we have to fine-tune it if possible. And that is the reason our company has an immense experience in providing this fine-tune in the form of a dedicated concentrated palmitic acid source. Actually, a range of these products are available to fine-tune and achieve the ideal ratio. So what is this ideal ratio of the total saturated fat? Well, it seems like that minimum 50% of the total saturated fatty acid ratio needs to be coming from palmitic acid. The palmitic acid is a very interesting molecule, in my opinion. If you look up your physiological books or ask experts on this regard, they would say that palmitic acid is also, like, together with myristic acid, they also do provide, if the body or physiologically is in need for extra energy, they can burn it. On the other hand, they have also the starting point for elongation and desaturation to create signalization molecules. And that is one of the powerful traits of palmitic acid. So palmitic acid is very important. And this is where we can give a hand for you if you wish to do so and explore this opportunity. So what I would like to show you is actual a feeding program, what we have done with broilers. And we try to apply different types of and different concentrations of palmitic acid sources. And we also wanted to compare it to just strictly wheat starch, because as the control reference, and also wanted us to compare to the most ubiquitous vegetable fat sources, soybean oil. Well, technically, what you see, the numbers in minimum concentrations of palmitic acid, let it be a pure fatty acid or in triglyceride form, you see we have different concentrations. Let's start from the bottom one. We have a particular a solution as lecitinated fat powder available for poultry nutrition is minimum 60% palmitic acid content together with dedicated MCT oil as triglycerides. And this is a fat powder which is specially designed for monogastric animal nutrition to provide quick energy and also lasting energy. Particularly young and growing animals benefit from it. In the middle, you see our standard basic product, which has also in triglyceride form, minimum 70% concentration. And this is the most popular, so to speak, all around the world. And the top one is a very specific product, which is not a triglyceride, but a standalone fatty acid-based product. Together, all three also containing different degrees of lecithin products. So lecithin is also one of our expertise in this regard. And the marriage between palmitic acid and lecithin-based products provides wonderful nutritional solutions. So what happens when you start feeding in comparison to wheat starch, soybean oil, and the different concentrations of palmitic acid, let it be in pure palmitic acid or in triglyceride or triglyceride and MCT oil combinations? What you see is no matter what, the isonutritious diet is important to note. However, the source of the fatty acid source is significantly influences the final weight of the birds. These were broilers at 35 days. And you can see that the presence of a different fatty acid source and formulating for the desired ideal total saturated fat and total unsaturated fatty acid ratio results in a better weight gain. So the growing characteristics of the birds do respond very well. What about the average daily weight gain? The average daily weight gain in this regard for the total or the full growing period is also exhibiting a favorable trend, especially when you compare it to the most ubiquitous soybean oil. I think the feed efficiency is definitely giving a very interesting picture. However, if you look at the combination products, so this is where I think fatty acids in combination should be considered, and as a final dietary goal when you do your feed formulation, and if possible, walk away from a single fat source. I don't think it's easy to say. However, it's worth exploring, especially with our help. But I think this is one of the most interesting results what we have demonstrated over the years, that actually we can favorably influence the post-slaughter drip loss trend in the function of technically supplementation of different palmitic acid sources. What does it mean? Look at the either starch or soybean oil, which is a highly unsaturated vegetable fat, that as baseline, and after 48 hours drip loss, of course, in the varying degree, but very similarly, the palmitic acid-based products provide a better solution. In other words, what does it mean? I think for one hand, this is important to consider shelf life. Secondary, I was asking around the world during the last 10 years since I'm involved in this kind of applications, the culinary experience besides just those technical parameters. And I think poultry production globally is on the rise, and it will remain around 1.5 to over 2% organic growth annually for the next couple of years to come, for sure. So poultry products consequently also entering into the space of sausages and cured meats. So I think the composition of the birds during growth is important to favorably influence the shelf life and the experience when the consumers eat that meat. So this is just a glimpse of what can be done when you do a particular approach in the ideal ratio and also the source material regarding the fatty acid source. So what are the conclusions on this one? And I like to summarize it in four major sections. First and foremost, I think it is always beneficial to know and understand the overall fatty acid profile of your diet and your dietary fat source. I think it helps a lot. Plus, it makes you more confident when you do a feed formulation aiming for more health and more productivity. Secondly, I think dietary fat and it's is important to understand the effects on the potential and the carcass traits. And also, we do recommend a species-specific approach, because I mentioned beforehand, in poultry, we'd like to see plus minus 10% to the total saturated dietary fat profile should be around 30 or hovering around this, and the remainder part of the total unsaturated fatty acids content around 70%. And furthermore, we do believe that the ideal fatty acid ratio is absolutely verifiable and can become practice in the field. And we have several customers around the world and also our own trials to prove it, not to mention the literature. And in the end, we do believe that the species-specific fatty acid profile works best, not necessarily, but works best when we do consider a significant part of the total saturated fatty acid content coming from palmitic acid sources, as we just demonstrated in the previous slides. And I think I hope that I could raise some thoughts and ideas and also opportunities for you to improve your dietary fatty acid profile if possible. Plus, in the hindsight of the final product, this is important. And I would say a growing trend in the immediate future. Thank you very much for your kind attention, and I hope to be able to answer your questions. I stop now the presentation, and I would be very happy to answer your questions. Thank you, Alvin. I see some questions here.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Sandor, for that very insightful, very helpful presentation of yours. And yeah, we've got a couple of questions in the Q&A. But before that, I'd like to remind again of our attendees, if you wish to ask questions to our speaker today regarding the presentation, you are free to put them on in the Q&A box that you can see in your Zoom panel. Type them in, and we will be happy to answer them right now. Okay, so Dr. Shadow, let's just go ahead and answer the questions here. Okay, let's start off with first. I think the first question, our attendee is asking, what other nutritional factors should complement the use of fatty acids to achieve best results in poultry production? So yeah, I'm not sure if you're to answer that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, first and foremost, we're talking about influencing dietary energy, right? And we try to achieve it with different either vegetable or fatty acid or fat sources, including carbs, and also the digestible amino acid ratios. Now, in my opinion, I always, when I look at a formula, I would like to look at the total dietary energy and then explore where it is coming from. Second level, I would say digestible amino acid and their respective ratio to each other and to dietary energy. And the dietary energy can be either metabolizable or apparent metabolizable energy or nitrogen corrected apparent metabolizable energy or even net energy these days. Number three, I would also look at the major minerals and then the macro minerals, and then the rest of the diet should like vitamin levels and all these other specific little components. But the first four, in my opinion, energy, where it's coming from, then amino acids in digestible manner, and the macro and micro minerals, plus the other important but not necessarily the main characteristics. So I think also when you consider fatty acids, it's important to understand your vegetable or fat or fatty acid source. And I think saturated fats, we now know that they are integral part and should not be shied away. And in fact, they bring in stability into your diet, in my experience, because they are less prone to oxidization from one hand. Secondly, you can maybe have more control, especially when you buy from proven sources. I hope I could address it in a bit broader manner, the first questions.
Yeah.
I also see.
Yeah, you can go ahead as well. Yeah.
I also see the second question. How would you describe the effects of corn diet supplemented with fatty acids? Yes, it's a good one. We know that corn soy diets are the prevailing dietary approaches, more than 70% around the globe. And usually, in my experience, these diets are supplemented either with soybean oil or soybean and corn oil or some kind of other highly unsaturated vegetable fat blends can happen, like corn soy or corn rice bran or peanut, depending on the type of market we're talking about. Well, in this regard, I would definitely recommend that you source a bit of a more saturated fatty acid source. Let it be lacinated fat powder as an example, what you have just seen, and the effects of corn diets, yes, they will be probably more palatable, first and foremost, and you can also influence favorably all those fat-soluble nutrients that can be maybe not that readily available in a dry corn soy diet. On the other hand, you always have to look at the fat source, what you have available there. Under the number 3, under heat stress, how can fatty acids help poultry chicken? Well, heat stress is an interesting question, is because when there is a retarded voluntary feed intake resulting from an incremental increase of heat, even despite fans running or trying to control the temperature, the voluntary feed intake is altered, of course. There are two ways to go about this. Well, I have seen in practice that the time of feeding is usually deferred to the later part of the day or early morning hours. So in that regard, fatty acids as part of the natural part of fat sources are not providing any extra edge, so to speak. However, the density of the diet need to be increased. And in that regard, you have to look at your fat or vegetable fat source. Now, when you have a bit of stop and go or different feeding periods during the day, I think the increase or trying to adhere the just recently described species-specific total saturated fat and total unsaturated fat ratio helps. Because if you just use just one type of highly unsaturated vegetable oil, the potential for enterocyte level oxidative stress is a bit higher. So that's why we do recommend more approach profiling the species-specific total saturated and total unsaturated fatty acid profile. Let me scroll down a little bit. Number 4, is the C16 blended with the feed? And I'm not so sure that I understand this question. I suspect that with the feed and fed to the animals. So okay, the C16. Usually, if you are searching for a C16 source, it comes as a fat powder from a respected company like us or any others or participants in this business. So usually, this is used either or together or standalone manner in the diet. So I think that's what maybe the question was referring to. Dr. Harish is asking a question, is adding dietary powder fat acid economical along with liquid oils and the diets? Well, this is a very good question because at first hand, especially in young poultry nutrition, in my opinion, it is always tempting to use the cheapest and the highest energy content fat powder. And hello? Okay, you can hear me. But especially in young animal nutrition, I would recommend to review at least the potential to alter the fatty acid profile because liquid oils, especially liquid unsaturated fatty acid sources, are the total saturated fat content is somewhere between 15 to 20% at most from a total point of view. So if you can increase an additional 10 percentage point, the total saturated fatty acid content, using an outside source. That could be economical because you can favorably influence the daily weight gain, and also, which I did not dwell too much on, the mortality rate. And I think resulting from many aspects, let it be heat stress, accelerated oxidative stress, and so on. So I think this holistic approach makes opportunities for lecitinated or dedicated saturated fat powders to appear in the diet, along with the existing or already existing vegetable oils and fats. Another question coming from Mr. Tan. How do fatty acids interact with other feed ingredients, such as protein or fiber, in terms of nutrient absorption, overall digestibility? Well, definitely unsaturated fatty acids do present a problem by themselves. The natural decomposition is relatively fast, and they're prone to oxidation, especially in the presence of aggressive mineral sources, could be. And that is the reason when you make the feed, the sequence of mixing is important. Secondly, the fiber sources, I'm not seeing too much of an issue. However, depending on the protein is a bit broad. I would say amino acids. And amino acids, depending on the type of amino acids, need to be considered carefully, and also the sequential mixing chain is important. So you have to have a bit of an experience what would be needed to add first, and what needed to be added last into the mixture. But usually saturated fatty acid sources, when we try to uplift a little bit the total saturated fat, these are palmitic acid based. They are more benign. They do not interact in a negative manner, I would say. And the last question I see: how do different types of fatty acids, saturated versus unsaturated, affects the growth performance and feed conversion ratio of poultry? Well, we have seen in those graphs that a concentrated source of saturated fat, let it be palmitic acid, beneficial and affects the growth performance and also the feed conversion in general for poultry. Now, we have to be careful in the early stages of development here. Usually, in our feeding recommendations to customers and feeding programs, in the first 7 to 14 days, we always try to steer the attention of our clients to be using medium chain triglycerides, or if not possible, then using additional palmitic acid based products to establish a species specific total saturated fat and total unsaturated fat ratio more towards the species specific manner. If you can achieve that, you can already see, or you will see a benefit in average on overall flock health, I would say, and also that can be measured in feed efficiency or voluntary feed intake. So I think it is important to follow. I think the take-home message would be, from my side, the take-home message is the species-specific approach in the fatty acid ratio established when you're establishing the dietary fatty acid ratio, meaning total saturated and total unsaturated fatty acid ratio. I hope it helps to our colleagues, and appreciate your questions and attention. Oh, there's another one. Is there any technology to assess fatty acids in diets remotely? I would say, first and foremost, when you have any kind of fat source and you are interested in the fatty acids, I would definitely go to a wet chemistry lab first. And then I'm sure many of the feed mills and integrations have NIR, and probably the provider of the NIR service already has experience in terms of estimating the fatty acid profile of different fat, let it be vegetable or animal origin fat sources. That I think also helps, and that could be the remote aspect of that. First and foremost, I always go with a COA and have an analysis report from a wet chemistry lab, at least once a quarter, or as often as possible. You shall be assessing your fatty acid or fat sources.
All right. Well, it seems like that is all the questions there is.
Thank you.
From our attendees. Once again, thank you for the questions, and I hope that we have answered them for you. And well, in case that you have questions that you wouldn't want to share it here, but you would like to send it directly to Dr. Sandor, you are actually free to send an email with the email that is used when you register for this webinar, and we'll be happy to send them to our speaker. And
Good.
yes, and once again, we would like to thank our speaker for today for giving his time and sharing his knowledge and expertise on our exciting topic. I think I can speak for all of us that we have learned a lot with this topic today. And once again, if you have any questions, please do send them and we will be happy to answer them. And of course, we would like to thank Berg+Schmidt Animal Nutrition for bringing us this wonderful webinar. And we look forward to more of the exciting topics that will be covered by Berg+Schmidt. And lastly, to our attendees, of course, we appreciate your time for being here and welcome any feedback that you have on this webinar. Once again, please do visit IFIDLink's Agri Digital Hub to sign up in our future webinars. Thank you once again for joining us today, and we'll be happy to see you next time. Thank you.
We're honored. Thank you.